Thankful that this guy has just come off a long trip from Kenya in Africa back to England, because that means he's on the other side of the clock and can join us here on this On the Mark show. Alex Buckner, you're looking sprightly for someone who's been on like an 8-hour flight. How are you doing?
I'm struggling, but I'm doing fine. I'm excited to be on the show, more importantly. Some adrenaline's kicking me through.
Well, great. I'm so glad to have you. You're going to help us really, really unpack success around the greens. Now, you're DP World Tour instructor. You've taught just about all and sundry on all the European tours. I want to start you here because if anyone's paying attention to social media here of late, it's all about, vertical swing plane and angle of attack. Should I be steep? Should I be shallow around the greens? Kick us off with that statement, please.
It's a funny thing that, isn't it? Like, I think as humans, we like an answer, what should I be? And the reality is you can be both and it'd be advertised to be both. When teaching around the DP World Tour, we're so exposed to different conditions, different green surfaces, different amounts of spin that you can generate.
Mhm.
Um, if you're just one side of the coin and always that way, it's going to find you out.
Yeah.
You need to be both, and it's a tool, not a way. And you'll then start to see people hitting before the ball, then you'll start to see people hitting after the ball, then on top of it, and you'll see very different ball speeds come from it, very different trajectories, very different stopping powers.
Mhm.
And my God, they're so helpful to understand and use in especially around the DP where the conditions are so different.
Yeah, well, look, a lot of the noise is on social media. A lot of the vocal folks, and one of them, Joe Mayo, is a friend of mine, fantastic instructor. But you're right,
Absolutely.
it's very much situational. And so I want you to unpack that a little further because I feel like the golfer at large, perhaps even the elite golfer listening to this or watching this, an aside, Tommy Fleetwood pulled me aside the other day and he goes, "Hey, I like the podcast with whoever." And I was like, "Are you serious? You listen?" Anyway, but that's besides the point. Okay. Um, so Tommy, if you're listening, no kidding. I think the mistake that the golfer at large makes is they don't assess the lie well enough before they pick the shot. Would you agree with that statement and why?
I would totally agree with that. And in fact, I would say it's single-handedly the biggest difference between elite around the green players and non-elite around the green players because a lot of when around the green, you're adapting. You're adapting to a different yardage, a different, how would you put it, space on the green. And you're going to have to hit this thing higher or lower, more steep or less steep into it. And look, if you don't know what you're reading to adapt to, that's the first point. If there's more grass behind the ball, if ball is slightly sitting down, if it's on a downslope, the grass direction is growing a certain way, it's going to shift what style of technique and play you're going to have to do to either acquire a strike or acquire the flight that gets the job done in that scenario.
Mhm.
And if you're skipping over that step, then it's really pot luck whether you know get the right technique for the shot in the first place.
Yeah, pot luck is a good way of putting it. Okay, I've been bad because I was excited and I have not introduced you or allowed you to introduce yourself properly. But I'm going to hold this thought about club selection as well. First, though, Alex Buckner, I've introduced you as a DP World instructor. Tell the audience about you a little bit, please.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on the DP World Tour now. This is my fifth season. I was very lucky to have the opportunity with a player to be out on the tour across the majors as well. I've been lucky enough to coach across 7 majors with 6 different players, starting at the age of 23. So it was pretty early, to say the least.
Like the
So
Mozart
I've
of
been,
golf instructors, bro. I've been teaching golf since 1996, and if you had said to me at 23 you're coaching someone at a major, I think I might have soiled my pants. But anyhow, you go ahead, man. You show.
yeah, well, I mean, I definitely did. Not that I showed it, but I definitely did.
Uh-huh.
So look, I've been a fast learner, more down to the fact that I've had to be, and but more importantly, as much as that side has been great, I teach at home at Bearwood Lakes every ability of a golfer.
Mhm.
So yeah, I like to say the fact that my experiences very well rounded, even if it has been in such a short space of time.
Would you say that working with a beginner golfer, in a way, uh, in contrast to the elite, almost makes your powers of communication as an instructor a little better because you know with an athlete you can just say, "Hey, I want this to happen," and they'll figure out a way. Where with a
Mm.
beginner, you got to guide them and communicate and sort of paint the picture a whole lot better. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And there's two sides to it. The easy part about teaching a beginner is the fact that there's no concepts that they know of anything yet.
Mhm.
So whatever you sort of tell them, they go, well, you know what? Okay, that makes sense, and they buy into the idea straight away.
Yeah.
Now, getting them to do the idea is really tough
Mhm.
because the skill level isn't quite there yet. Whereas the elite player, they've been told things, they believe things, even if the fact that it might not be true from a factual standpoint, the I would say interpretation might be actually quite correct. And as a result, the harder part is dealing with a player with a different language of the way they communicate the right thing.
Yeah.
But when you then tell them something that is right, you sort of know straight away, so they can just do it. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's an easy side and a hard side to each player.
I love the way you communicate things. We're going to get to it in a minute with your four entry points as it deals with, where the club lands, how it interacts with the ground and the surface, and then the golf ball. But before we go there, you're a bit of a short game expert, but for in every department of the game, I feel like it's best learned from close to the hole than moving away because so much of the way the club interacts with the ground and the ball is kind of the same thing throughout the bag, just with varying speeds and lofts. Talk about that a little bit because so many folks are straight to the range hitting full shots where they could learn how to control the golf ball a whole lot better when they got something shorter in their hand and swinging smaller.
Yeah, like Jerome Thomas, I was speaking to, this was a few years back, and he said, look, I don't look at their swing past a wedge if they can't hit a wedge shot. Just doesn't make sense to me otherwise. And I
Okay.
thought, yeah, it's a really great way to look at it. Yeah. But I agree. And like you can get all the understandings and all the, how would you put it, right moves from a smaller little standpoint and actually see a real good result because you actually got a hole there and you've got a real reaction on the green and you've actually got a real lie. Whereas on the range, you don't have them things.
Yeah.
And if you can learn it from there and then sort of move it back, especially as a beginner golfer, you can learn a lot of the right concepts on the right moves and then build it up naturally a lot easier, I believe.
I'm going to make a statement. I want you to agree or disagree or elaborate, however you feel fit. You know him well, former world's number one golfer in Luke Donald, arguably, one of the great pitchers and bunker players ever to play the game.
For sure.
And a lot of what he does, and he's an expert around the greens, and he's very experimentational and such, but he kind of reverse engineers the swing from how he wants the club to interact with the ball. So if he's looking for the club to do X, then he kind of goes from contact into backswing into downswing into backswing, and sort of feels his way. So he backs into the style of delivery, which I feel like is genius in a way, because most folks are like swinging back one way and swinging down the other, and then hoping to try and finagle the club face at the very last second to get the reaction they want from the golf ball.
Yeah. So when you were saying about reading the scenario, um, I feel like this sort of goes into that reading. Actually, in order to get that strike that I'm looking for, to get the penetration or the trajectory, whatever terminology you want to use,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm looking for, the ball speed that I'm looking for, what what actually creates that to begin with? Where is my entry point? What loft do I hit it with to begin with? If you can get that good idea first,
Yeah.
it paints the picture of then all of a sudden how you got to move. So yeah, I would totally agree with that, and I use that a lot. A friend of mine, Hugh Marr, is big on that as well. Is very much painting the idea. Okay, well, how is it possible first,
Mm-hmm.
and then when you've got that idea, well, would you know how to move in order to create that? More often than not, it's a yes. The idea of it just becomes a lot clearer.
Hugh Maher is fantastic. He's been on the show a couple of times. You and he have got a podcast, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, Hugh was very kind enough to take me in under his wing, and I worked at his facility for a few years, and we've always been good mates since.
So you're grading my interviewing skills, is that
No, not at all.
it?
Not at all. And if anything, I'm learning from you.
Yeah, you lie. Okay, let's go. You put up a post that caught my attention. I reached out right away. I mean, folks, I saw the post and I stopped like halfway through it and I direct messaged Alex off the bat. And thankfully, he agreed to join us because I feel like in the era of information, in this understanding is sadly lost. And a lot of it is born of an interaction I had on social media way back where I got ripped for a statement I made that I know was right because I kind of learned it from Jose Maria Lazabal, and there's a few people that pitch better than him. Anyhow, so you talked about 4 entry points, is what you call it. And the entry points are where the club enters the ground in relation to the ball and how it reacts, and then where the low point of the arc was. I thought it was brilliant. I'm going to read them to you, then I want to talk to all of them. And then I want to sort of talk about creating those environments because a lot of it is sort of done with ball position, weight distribution stuff. So they go as follows. There's the compressed entry point. There's the non-compressed or the stock pitch shot. There's the slider, which I thought was a cool name, and then the bunker shot. Now, most folks would sort of figure, okay, the bunker shot's entry point is before the golf ball.
Which it is.
Yeah. But there are a couple of them over here where the entry is surprisingly before the golf ball in relation to what people think. So let's start at the first one, the compressed one. So describe to us what that is and how the club reacts and how it comes into the ground in relation to the ball, what we expect to see.
Okay, so I think all we've got to do first is confirm the difference between entry point and low point. As I said, the two biggest things that gets confused, right? So, for example, the low point is the lowest point of the arc, and the entry point is where the club is interacting, and depends whether you're going to refer that to the ball or the ground. In this case, we're going to refer to it as the ball and ground in different scenarios.
Yes, I want to stop you there because I'm so glad you're doing this now. I'm going to point you a little further before we go into it. Folks, the lowest point of the arc could be well after the golf ball. It could be well before the golf ball. The lowest point of the arc with a driver is way different to what it is to a bunker shot. So just because you're hitting, 3 down doesn't mean that the low point can't be further away, or it's where the lowest point of the arc when it goes from down to up. So that's how it changes. So I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, the way I would explain it is the fact that if you were to have like a string and a ball attached to the string and you were to swing it back and forth, you've now got an arc, right? Now, let's say that you're swinging this on a table and you were to lower it, you would then start hitting the table. And depending on where it obviously hits the table on that arc, you would then start to find the fact that actually, you know what, I've lowered the arc, I've now started hitting the table earlier in its arc. And that's what people generally see when they duff the ball. They'll then go, right, well, I've entered really early. I must try and move it more forwards. So if I had that ball swinging on that string and I tried to move it forwards for having the string ball really low, I would still hit a long way behind. And you can have an entry point that is very, very early, while the lowest point of the arc is very, very forwards. And that will be down to the fact that it's really deep, it's really low relative to the ground.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting about the bunker shot when we come to the bunker shot low point, is because the entry point is before the ball, but the low point is after the ball. And if you can then start to understand that, and this is why I use the visuals in the Instagram, because when you see it, it's very easy to understand it.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely. All right. So we're on the way. We are equipped with understanding and knowledge. So help us with the compressed strike with the
So the compressed strike is very similar to a full swing. You hit the ball first, you hit the ground second, and more often than not, you would see a divot whenever this happens, meaning the lowest point of the arc is below the turf. Now, it doesn't need to be below the turf. It can be on it. It doesn't matter. The main point of this is the fact that the ball is being struck first, and then the low point is ahead of the ball. And the things we can sort of expect with that is less dynamic loft being hit into the ball.
Mm-hmm.
We can expect a steeper angle of attack, and we can expect a higher amount of ball speed, which is exactly what you're looking for regarding long game stuff. You probably pitch the ball the same way. If you're then around the green, well, you'd probably therefore expect a very low, very hot, but high spin ball flight.
Yeah.
And when people then play this shot, you would see very, very small backswings. Like John Rahm, for example, with the Ryder Cup in Rome, I think he holed two shots. Well, 2 out of 3 shots he holed on the first day of the Ryder Cup. He hit the ball first and then a little bit of a divot second. It was quite stabby.
Yeah.
And the ball would come out quite low, quite hot, and then all of a sudden spin. And that's where you would start seeing it being played. And then you then think of then the context of when he played it. He was in a really grainy lie into grain on one of the shots and from the fairway. He was then in quite thick rough, so being a little bit steeper into the back of the ball to get a bit more, a hotter ball speed and a cleaner strike. They would be good, times to bring out a compressed style low point.
Yeah. Use the use of John Rahm to sort of illustrate it. It helps people to see the picture. I want to almost go a little further, and in that very Ryder Cup, I mean, the video's done the rounds. It could be one of the greatest shots I've ever seen with my own two eyes because I was there. 17th hole, par 3, McIlroy has missed the green left, playing alongside Fitzy. And Rory hits this lob wedge that comes in there, sort of mid-height, hits the ground, jumps forward once, and like spins like a top on the spot. It's just like fizzing on the ground there and stops. And everyone was like they gasped at the reaction of the ball.
Yeah.
It was that sort of shot that you're describing now, where it's almost like if you watch the strike sometimes, to me, it's almost like it's a groove low or two in the face when the ball's met, but they're running down the back of the thing real hard for a lot of friction.
Oh, it's definitely a low style contact, especially what he's talking about there. But have you actually seen the video of him describing on how he played that shot?
No.
He says, I tried to hit behind it.
Seriously?
Seriously.
Didn't look
Yeah,
like it.
it's I know exactly, right?
He hung across it hard for the folks if you go and find it now. It was really knifing across the thing from outside to it.
So the fact that it was a slightly lower contact leads me to believe, again, we don't know this because of measurements, but I'd imagine it was definitely a lot closer to a non-compressed contact.
Okay.
Now this will be when the arc's a little higher, therefore the lower contact that you just said there, Mark. And the low point would have been around about just on the ball rather than before, because it's stuck on the bottom grooves. What it didn't do was slide up the face.
I got you. Right.
So this is where then the non-compressed comes in quite handy now, where you move this arc a little bit higher, so you're not making a divot, it hits lower on the face, and you start moving the arc a bit more towards underneath the ball rather than ahead of it. And the reason why then people play this shot is to have no divot interaction. It comes off a little softer, but it doesn't float. It still comes out somewhat forwards.
Oh, okay, that's where I misunderstood it. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and as a result, then spin is very obtainable because it's a bit of a weaker ball speed, meaning you can hit it harder. You can swing across it as well, which is quite nice. Not that you can't swing across a compressed one, but swing across it on a non-compressed one with some more speed will give you a heap ton of spin ability.
Right.
And as a result, then this thing can still come out quite low, yet quite soft ball speed and spin a lot.
That is very, very cool. I got to ask this. Actually, no, I'm not going to get the cart before the horse because we're describing shots, but I'm getting excited. I need to ask you about ball position and that sort of stuff as these different shots vary. So we got 1 and 2, the non-compressed and the compressed. The non-compressed is essentially the stock pitch shot.
Yeah.
Let me talk about the slider.
So the slider is when you start interacting with the ground first. So you're starting to move the arc behind the ball and making sure the arc doesn't go beneath the ground. Because if it does, and we hit behind the ball, then we duff it. So we want it on the surface. but we want to hit behind it on purpose. And the reason why people do this is to allow the ball to start rolling up the face a lot higher. You're trying to actually get the grass in between the ball and the club to gain some sort of interruption to lower ball speed. So
Mm.
as a result, this ball will now jump out a lot higher because it's rolling up the face, and therefore, your contact will be higher on the face as a result. But also from there, then, because it's not a clean contact, it comes out slower. So when you see these balls that come out really, really high, they feel like they've got nothing on them, and they didn't look like they had loads of loft. Then you look at the entry point; it's actually before, and they've made a huge swing. That's what you're seeing there. So if you're seeing, like, for example, on the side of the green, someone's hit full swing from just off the green, and it's only gone about 5 yards, but stopped on a dime. They're not hitting the ball first, and if they did, it'd be on the next hole. And if you're then looking at then really tight mown areas where the green's raised, like Parker McClellan put one on his social media tonight where Cam Smith's hitting one from a shaving area to a raised green, and he's hit before the ball. Again, that's to get the ball high very quickly, but then also soft at the same time. And it's an invaluable, really valuable tool. And the more you go to, for example, like the Open, where you don't have any spin power, because it's a very different grass, and the what do you call it, the fairways are so tight and they're so firm, you need that shot especially.
Okay, I know a lot of folks are listening to this going, oh my God, if I try and land the golf club before the ball, I'm cooked. So I don't want to try that. But you're right. I don't think people realize, because we had Paul Wood from Ping on here, and he shared a lot of his wedge research with landing points and bases of arc and that sort of stuff. And it was a finding that, the really good pitchers of the golf ball, they do land the club marginally early, but
Mm.
it's not like it's landing a long ways from the ball. It's just interacting with the grass slightly before the golf ball. So it's a maybe a centimeter or so that it touches the ground before the contact.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be loads. But the funny part is for that, it could be if your arc depth was half decent. Now, the reason why people play this shot badly is because they have the fear of the club bouncing up too quickly.
Yeah.
Now, the way I would see it is for that you've got two bouncers. You've got the firmness of the surface bounce. So, for example, if I knock on my table, that's the surface bounce.
Mm-hmm.
And that combined with then the sole bounce, and that's the bounce at the bottom of your golf club.
Yeah.
So if you had St Andrews fairway, that's rock firm, and then you opened your blade up that had a lot of sole on it. Okay, it was not a grind that was shaven down and full bounce or whatever else. You have lots of firmness in the surface bounce, and then you've also got a lot of bounce in your wedge. That's too much bounce.
Yeah.
Right. If you're then on a really wet, soggy lie, mud, but then which is not a lot of surface bounce, but then you had a lot of sole bounce, that would actually marry up quite nicely.
Okay.
And what you want to do is you want to make sure the fact that you're combining these things quite well. And then the third part is then matching your arc to it. So I'll give some context to this, right? So, for example, you're in St Andrews again, or an open venue, but you had raised greens and you had to play this shot where you were going to land the club early.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, don't have too much bounce on a lob wedge. If you're using too much bounce on a lob wedge where the surface is too firm, you probably won't be able to play the shot to begin with. But let's say you did, and it was a T grind for for sake of argument. You want to make sure that your arc isn't too deep, because on a soft ground, if it was too low, it would just get stuck.
Yeah.
Versus where it's in a firmer ground, it would kick off quite quickly.
Accelerate. Yeah.
So the two examples I would have is, like, let's say you had a block of butter that was been frozen overnight, and then you had a mildly soft block of butter next to it. And I had a spoon, and I went bang on the soft one and bang on the firm one. The firm one would kick off very quickly. while the soft one would have a little splat, probably work somewhat in the middle, right?
Yeah.
Let's say then I had a knife and I worked across each block of butter. I wouldn't cut a lot
Mm-mm.
on either, but the lowest point I moved the knife across didn't get low enough to cut anything in the first place. And that's low point.
Yeah.
If your low point isn't deep, then it's fine.
And that's why if you go to a DP World, well, actually probably more on the PGA Tour because of turf conditions. Sometimes in Europe at links courses, otherwise it's quite soft around there.
Yeah,
You see guys where it does look like they're kind of picking the ball off the ground. But there's not a whole lot of dig. Unless
no.
you're watching Jordan Spieth, who's been on the show, that said to me as a kid, he learned to head very close to the ball with a lot of spin, and every lob wedge he carries has got almost 0 degrees of bounce on there. So he's
Yeah.
not afraid to go and try and stick the club into the ground.
Mm-hmm. As a result, then, which how would you put it, low point would he use more often than not? He'd use the compressed, right?
Exactly right. But then,
So
but he kind of can. You see, and this is the vagaries and the beauty of it. Or to me, he's got such a weak left hand grip that the face is playing quite open, and he's almost trying to turn the face closed, but yet the face is still playing open. So he can do that without getting that jet that sort of shoots away from him if he shuts the face down too much.
well, this is where path is a big tool, you know. Now if you cut across it with, a face that's obviously pointing right to the path, you're going to slow the ball speed down.
Mhm.
So, for example, you've got a very hot compressed style of low point that is then counteracted by an open face to path.
Yeah.
That's how he gets the ball to behave the way he wants. Now, if he was to draw the thing, he'd have to put a 65 in the bag to
Mhm.
get that ball not going out too quick and too low.
And again, that sort of gets back to what we were saying about learning club and ball and ground and path and face and all these sorts of reactions at slow speed. And because the reaction is the same whether it's 100 miles an hour or 10 miles an hour. Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So cool. Okay, let's get to the bunker shot, where obviously the entry point is well before the golf ball, and the low point is almost right underneath the golf ball. Yes.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. And this is where I don't think it's too far away in what a 7-iron would be. This is where then, for example, think of the arc where you would hit ball first, ground second, and make a bit of a divot. If you were to just move the arc slightly back, where you would then hit the ground first instead, well, that's actually quite a lovely depth. And then all of a sudden, the low point sits around about underneath the ball to maybe even slightly ahead of it. And that's all a bunker shot really is.
Mm.
We don't want to get the arc too deep, and we also don't want to get it too forwards. We want it just slightly back, but then just slightly into the ground. And that's it.
It's- I'm listening to you and you're drawing the picture, and I have to sort of say this, and I'm going to let you finish the statement. Folks, if you want to launch a driver, this is kind of how you feel. Now, the club is not necessarily interacting with the ground, although I have seen some guys like a VJ Singh, for argument's sake, almost bounce the driver off the ground before he hits the golf ball because he's got the entry point, or in this case, the lowest point of the swing, and the entry point kind of almost married. They're one thing in relation to the ball position that's forward.
Yes, correct.
Am I
Exactly. And that's
describing
the
that
reason.
correctly?
And that's the reason why we put the ball position forwards in the bunker.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, it's and this is where ball position is such a tool. When I get a lot of mid handicaps, even low handicaps. You go, well, why am I struggling with short game? Is it my ball position? Well, no, no, like that's a tool. At the end of the day, you want to move it around to be able to access different ball speeds, different trajectories, different spins, different shots to put it as an umbrella.
Yeah.
If you're misstriking it because of the ball position, you're looking in the wrong place. All right. Again, if you're looking at the fact that you're misstriking it because of angle of attack, I doubt it because you want to change angle of attack. If you're misstriking it because you think the fact that your path is in the wrong spot, well, I hate to say it, but some people like to draw chip shots and some people also like to fade chip shots.
Yeah.
So I doubt it. You got to stop looking at the tools in order to fix strike, because it's got nothing to do with it. You have to understand, all right, these are the tools I want to use to be able to play different styles of shots. They are where you enter relative to the ball, how much loft you have in your hand, what angle of attack you use, and the path. And if you can, well, face the path, should I say. And if you can then start to understand how to use them to be able to create different shots, apply that when reading a lie, and then use that in a contextual format, you're winning.
I must ask the question then. For the different shots, you would advocate the ball moving around the place for the 4 different entry points, naturally.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So then I would expect that, to sharpen up the angle of attack, or to, have it come in a little less sharper, you would probably advocate that not just the ball's moving around, but where the pressure is put, sort of leaning left or not leaning left, that you'd advocate some of that too. So please explain.
Yeah, for sure. But in some respects, the ball position also does that,
Yeah.
because it would be later in the arc or early in the arc. That's actually the beauty of simplifying it into the 4 low points,
Yeah.
is
Okay.
because you're somewhat dealing with loft, you're somewhat dealing with entry point, and you're somewhat dealing with angle of attack, because they all sort of, they affect all of them. Now, could you extreme it by, what, I want to get a little bit more steeper on this. I'm not only just going to put the ball back, but I'm also going to tilt my body a little left for a right-handed golfer, and put my pressure forwards. Yeah, you could, for sure. And that's when you start to understand the effects of the tools and how to use them, you can just do them by a bit, or you could extreme it. And, you know, out on the DP, we have extreme lies and extreme scenarios. So we do have to learn how to extreme it.
Mm-hmm.
As a simplicity format, just moving ball position, understanding these 4 low points, struggle to understand what else you would really need to know.
Yes, and I guess I've got to make this observation and let you clean it up. So often, most golfers play to the ball position.
Mm,
Like, they would move the ball back because they want to strike it a little bit more downward with a face a little less lofted, a little more shaft lean. But
yeah.
then the ball's back in their stance and the pass a little inside out. So then they drop back to go and hit it, and they just throw off the entire relationship that they were trying to set up. Wherever the ball position is, you're trying to almost kind of land the club in the same place in relation to wherever you got the ball. Is this how we're going here?
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly that. So you're making the same move. You're landing the club in exactly the same position, and you're letting your intention of low point, where the ball sits in that, do the talking.
Love it.
And I sort of got the idea when one of our players had a practice round with Phil Mickelson and John Rahm, but it was Phil Mickelson that I was talking to at the time. It was at Royal Liverpool for the Open at Hoylake, and I had a I want to say he wasn't a great golfer. Come to me at home for a lesson. He said, I watched a video of Phil Mickelson, and he said, you got to put the ball back or the ball forwards, never place it in the middle. And he's got his feet outside his shoulders, placing it by the the ball outside his right foot and the ball
Yeah.
outside his left foot. And I said, look, Phil has his feet a little bit closer. But it did make me quite interested. So I had the opportunity. I said, Phil, what is your philosophy on why you tell people to put the ball forwards, put the ball back? And he said, well, amateurs, what they don't do is decide what shot they're playing until they get to the bottom of the arc.
It's true. That's so true.
So I just think the fact that one of the best things that they can do is, if they put the ball back, where there's only a certain style of shot you can really play from there. So it sort of makes the decision for them. And if they play the ball forwards, it's the same. So the reason why I say it is because I think their intention needs to be clear before they play a shot, rather than trying to make it up at the bottom of the arc.
Carl, yeah,
And that's, I
I
just
think,
went, that's genius.
well, here's the thing. Thank you for sharing that, because I feel like you've saved more folks around the greens just with that statement than anything else. Because
Yeah.
they set up, they got the ball back, and then they want to, all of a sudden, mid downswing, they're falling back to scoop it into the air. It's like, whatever you've decided, you're going to go with that thing. You can't be recovering mid swing, and you might pull it off once or twice, but you're not going to be consistent.
Yeah, it's again one of the players that I was with this week in Kenya. We were talking about how important his vision was, and my mantra before was, look, your execution is your intention matched with your movement. And after this week, I'm going to change that slightly. I'm going to say it's your vision that matches your intention that is then matched with your movement. That is your execution. The vision's huge. You have to have the vision first, have the intention, how you create the vision, and then you got to then have the movement that creates the intention or matches the intention, should I say.
Yes, I'm agreeing with this with an anecdote from last week at the Genesis event in Torrey Pines. I'm there chatting with McElroy as he's warming up before the final round. And I hadn't seen it. Well, I saw him in Pebble Beach a few weeks prior, but we didn't really chat. I was on the course with him, just calling. So we had some time warming up. So I said to him, Rory, I got to know, were you honestly in a building in New York, just hitting balls into a net, not knowing where it's going? And he goes, yeah, absolutely. He goes, all I had is a camera that was videoing my golf swing. And all I was trying to do was just get the club into a certain place. I wasn't concerned with how the ball was going. And then he says the magic words. He goes, it's because I tend to react to wherever the target is. So I'm trying to do X, but the target's there. And then the athlete in me kicks in and the impulse is to get the ball there. So then you make some sort of a mid swing adjustment. So all he was doing was practicing in the sterile sort of environment. And if we bring it back to your low points, he's like, wherever the ball is, I'm trying to land there. So I'm trying to swing like this and land it in that place every single time. And he practiced like that for a couple of weeks. And his swing almost changed before our eyes because it's not like, again, there's a target at the end of this equation. I'm trying to do X, but dang, I've still got to get it over there. And so what you say there with the vision thing is real because we do react to what the intended goal is.
100%. I mean, another one is like alignment. Like people's alignment around the green is horrific, because it's just not on anyone's priority. But if you're aiming miles to the right, knowing the target's left, believe you me, you're going to do something
Yeah.
to make the ball go in the direction that you're visioning. And two big things in my mind is what's your target, where are you aligning, and what's your intention and how you get your vision. What's your concepts? And if they're slightly out, I'm probably not going to look any further. And
Mm,
if I'm honest, providing they're in place, they generally move the way you want them to anyway.
yeah.
So there's very little instruction I ever do, if I'm perfectly honest.
Okay. Let's stay there for a minute. Two more questions. I'll let you go because I know you're tired. Because of back in the day and a lot of golf instruction has sort of just been handed down through the ages. Um, the old timers, the Bobby Loxon company, the Bobby Jones and company didn't have a 60-degree wedge. So they'd turn their niblick, which was like a short iron, wide open. So they'd have to aim way left to allow this thing to play like a lob wedge.
Yeah.
We don't have that right now. So I'm sure you would advocate that you don't need to be as open to hit the floaty kind of one. Am I right?
No, not at all. Again, it comes down to how much loft you have in the bag. We've got 60 degrees these days. Can you then lower the handle? If you can, then great. You can aim straighter because the loft of the golf club can point straighter when you lower the handle. And if you can then understand, actually, you know what, I can hit behind this thing, then at the end of the day, it's going to square up easier. Could you do it the other way though? Stand the shaft up, open it up with a 56, swipe across it, and then aim left. 100%. But here's the funny thing about it. I think what we tend to do is we just say things are wrong because they're in the past, rather than going, you know what, why did it work? Because these guys are pretty decent. It's like in the bunker where aiming left and swinging across it is now a bad thing. Trust me, if I'm short-sighted, I'm opening that thing up and I'm swiping across it with some speed because it deadens the ball speed,
You don't need the
meaning that
full.
I can hit it hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. If the pin's 30 yards away and I swing across it while aiming left, I'll never get it there. That's where then maybe I might change it. I might actually go the complete opposite way. But again, that goes back to the conversation of that we have tools, you know?
Preaching.
Yeah, use them.
You're preaching. Well, that's what people got to realize about the ball position too, if you want to move it farther or shorter. Okay. I got to ask this before my closer. Do you advocate varying club selection to people?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I would for sure. Now it all depends on what's the accessibility regarding if that club can do the job. So, for example, let's say you're on an upslope, you're in thick rough, and the green is really slow and uphill, and the pin's at the back, and it's into wind. Can you de-loft your 60-degree enough and hit it hard enough to be able to get the flight that you're looking for? And if that is just a flat out no, you're gonna have to change.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Yes. Yes.
It's just that's it, right? And the other thing too is then, well, are you any good at de-lofting it that much? And if you're not, then actually you're gonna have to change your club quite a lot then if you're not a very good de-lofter of the golf club, you know? So there's a lot of these people saying, well, use one golf club. You're not going to practice with 5 different golf clubs around the green. Get good with 5. That's a lot of time consuming to master a lot of different style of golf clubs. And I would totally agree with that. But at the end of the day, let's say like Stephen Gallagher, see him around on the European tour, bumping running 7 irons from off the green. And I said, well, why are you doing that? He goes, well, I can't make a ball roll like a putt any better than this golf club from off the green. So I use this one. Then I've got then like a gap wedge where it goes at like a little mid flight that spins a bit. And then I have my lob wedge. He just sees them as styles of shots. It's only 3, but he goes down enough golf club to allow that style of shot to work. Now, if you can make a 60-degree come out like a 7-iron like that by de-lofting it and hooking it from the back foot, and you're really good at it, okay, then fine. Maybe you don't need to hit a 7-iron, but you got to be so good and skillful. You know, you got to be a Shane Lowry of the user of the 60-degree to be able to be that way. So yes, practicing with less golf clubs and being masterful with less golf clubs is 100% what I would advocate. But if you're trying to do everything with one when it's flat out not possible with either the situation or your skill level, you're going to have to understand how to use a different tool when needed.
Yeah, you're being a moron. What does
Yeah,
Martin Paul go? If you keep doing what you've been doing, you'll keep getting what you've been getting. Okay, I've got one more question. Have I lost you? Yeah, it's like legendary Martin Hall said, if you keep doing what you've been doing, you'll keep getting what you've been getting. Okay, so
yeah,
you've shared all the gold, you've shared how to do it. I'm listening to all this and I want to put a nice, pretty bow on the thing and to say, okay, folks, if you go practice just doing this, and I'm thinking you're going to put like a tee or a coin on the ground and land the club in that place all of the time, is that what let's give us a drill that we can go home and practice so we can get used to the entry point location and then we can move the ball around and hit different shots just like that.
yeah. So one of the things you've probably already gathered is I think it's really important to understand the depth first before the entry point.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can make a divot, okay, and just think about how you'd make one, whether that's, chucking your arms into the ground, lowering yourself in some sort of way, and understand that. Then from there, try and not make a divot. So just try and hit a blade of grass and then air shot. Okay. And you're starting to understand how you control the height of the arc. So a
Mm-hmm.
good way to do this is to set yourself up to the ball, the club on the ground, have a swing, and air shot it. The next one, I want you to then top it, then thin it, so hit the equator of the golf ball, then clip it, and then hit a divot.
Hmm.
And you'll start to understand how to just lower your depth of arc just ever so slightly, bit by bit. When you can then do that, you've got that skill. The follow up from there then is okay, now if I can control how deep my arc is and I can hit the ground without going into the ground, let's just see how far behind the ball I can physically hit without duffing it. And you'd be surprised. It'd be like around about like a foot. So you start at the ball, hit it. You then move an inch behind it, land in the same point relative to your body. So, for example, let's say the sternum, you hit it, then you move 2 inches, then 3 inches, and you just keep on going. And I've got lots of people to do this because they then all of a sudden get very comfortable with the slider.
Mm-hmm.
Then you move them back and you go, right, well, now, you're, let's say 6 inches behind the ball. Let's now go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now you're back at the ball.
Okay.
Then actually, you then start putting the ball further back in your stance. And as you're doing that, you're trying to create the same depth every single time.
Hmm.
And you'll then start to understand, okay, well, my entry point is now forwards. Now my entry point is now behind. Now it's bang at the ball. But you know what? Depth's the same each time. And it's important. You'll then start to clarify in your head, actually, you know what? I can be quite steep into the ball without being deep. And this is something that people really get confused with. In fact, I was on the bus with a Spanish player, Nacho. He's won twice on the DP. And me and his caddy are laughing because he keeps saying, well, I'm really shallow. And you look at the video and he is steep as anything, but he's not deep.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's the thing. The confusion's right there. And when you can then do that, it's easy. Because if you can get the depth decent, you can land up to a foot behind it and still hit a pretty decent shot. You only have to go on my Instagram to see that. It'll be somewhere. Still pretty decent. Yeah, okay, it's a very extreme slider. But if your depth's decent, the window of where you can land behind it to somewhat in front of it is massive, and yet the shot isn't that bad. So master that part first.
Lovely stuff. Making bad shots good while you're at it. You're an expert. I've yet to hear someone explain it as concisely and as simply as you have, Alex. Bravo.
I appreciate that, Mark. Thank you.
So toward that, now people are going to want to find you more. So where do they go? Tell us the Instagram, tell us the social, the websites and such, please.
Yeah, so Alex Buckner Golf. You'll find me on Instagram. I'm not very active on anything else, if I'm perfectly honest. But website-wise, www.alexbucknergolf.com. I'm hoping to be in the States for the PGA show next year. My brother lives in Jacksonville, so it's always a good excuse to go and see him, the sister-in-law and the niece. So yeah, fingers crossed I'll host something like an educational day at some point in January next year. And yeah, hopefully be in the States sooner rather than later.
And make sure you let me know so we can incorporate somehow. Alex.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for your time. This is great stuff. I appreciate you.
No, me too. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Mark.